10 twisted serial killers who taunted the police. Welcome to Creepshow, where we delve into the darkest corners of the human psyche, exploring the twisted minds of those who have left a chilling mark on history. Throughout the annals of criminology, there have been individuals who not only committed heinous acts, but also played a sinister game of cat and mouse with the authorities. These serial killers didn't just murder. They taunted the police, leaving behind cryptic clues, unsettling letters, and chilling phone calls that sent shivers down the spines of those who pursued them. In today's episode, we uncover the stories of 10 notorious killers who dared to challenge the very force trying to bring them to justice. Some were eventually caught, while others still lurk in the shadows, their identities unknown. Let's dive in. Number 10. Dennis BTK Raider. In Wichita, Kansas, serial killer Dennis Raider was responsible for the deaths of 10 individuals between the years 1974 and 1991. As a result of his method of operation, he is known by the moniker BTK, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill. Because of his terrifying presence, there was a significant increase in the number of people installing home security systems. On the other hand, there was a dark twist. Between the years 1974 and 1988, Raider was the one who was responsible for installing alarms for a security business. While he was taunting the authorities with letters that stated, "Good luck hunting," Raider was able to evade capture for approximately 30 years. Additionally, he provided a precise description of the positions in which the bodies had been left at each of the murder scenes. After a floppy disk that Raider had delivered to a local television station was swiftly tracked back to a computer that he had used at his church, Raider was taken into custody in the year 2005. One day, the BTK killer was apprehended, and he is currently serving his sentence of life in jail in a maximum security prison in the state of Kansas. Number 9. The Zodiac Killer. In Northern California, between the months of December 1968 and October 1969, a serial killer who has not been identified as the Zodiac Killer was responsible for the deaths of 5 confirmed victims. As a result of the killer sending encrypted messages to the media after each murder, the investigations were extremely frustrating for the cops. According to one of the ciphers, this is the Zodiac speaking. And by the way, have you deciphered the most recent cipher that I sent to you? Greetings, my name is. Despite the fact that it consisted of a string of letters and symbols, the code has never been resolved. I enjoy killing people because it is so much fun. It is even more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all to kill, read another letter. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest. In addition, the Zodiac revealed information about the killings that would have been known to the actual perpetrator. And it cautioned that the victims who had been killed in the past would not be the last. Mark Hewitt, an author who has written books about the murderer, has stated that the Zodiac case is the #1 unsolved American criminal mystery. In essence, it is the Jack the Ripper of the United States. I believe that more individuals are looking at this issue than any other case that has been investigated. Number 8. David, son of Sam, Berkowitz. Between 1976 and 1977, David Berkowitz, a serial murderer, was responsible for the deaths of 6 persons in New York City. As the son of Sam, he asserted that the murders were carried out by the dog that belonged to his neighbor. Every single one of the random attacks that took place throughout the city was carried out using a revolver of ×5 caliber. Timothy J. Dowd, an officer of the New York Police Department, was a member of the homicide squad that was entrusted with apprehending the murderer. After receiving a scary letter from Berkowitz, Dowd received a letter that threatened his daughter Melissa, who was of adolescent age. Melissa recalled in a recent documentary titled Son of Carrie, Son of Sam, "I don't think I was mature enough to realize how frightening it was at the time, but I came home and they had installed an active police radio in the dining room, and a radio police car circled our block periodically from that point forward. Melissa was referring to the fact that she had not yet reached the age of maturity when she experienced the terrifying event. The reign of terror that Berkowitz had been practicing came to an end when his vehicle was located through the use of a $35 parking ticket that he had obtained when he was parked close to the location of his last murder. Since 1977, he has been incarcerated without the possibility of release. Number 7. Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper, a horrific serial killer who became known as Jack the Ripper, haunted the streets of Whitechapel, London, more than a century ago. He was a strange and horrifying individual. The bodies of 5 ladies were found in 1888, and they had been cruelly butchered. Their throats had been sliced, and their lower abdomens had been destroyed. Dear Boss was the title of a letter that was delivered to the Central News Agency not long after the murders had begun. A warning was included in the letter that the murderer would carry out another attack and cut the ladies' ears off. The subsequent victim was discovered with one ear removed just 3 days after the first victim. After a month had passed, a second letter with the title, From Hell, was delivered to the head of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. In this letter, the author asserted that the perpetrator had fried and eaten half of the kidney of the previous recipient. The other half of the kidney, which had been preserved in alcohol, was included with the package that included this item. The case of Jack the Ripper remains one of the most renowned unsolved serial killings in London, despite the fact that Scotland Yard conducted a comprehensive inquiry into the matter. Number 6. William the Lipstick Killer. Errands. During the years 1945 and 1946, 3 ladies were brutally killed in the city of Chicago. The perpetrator of the crime used the lipstick of one of the victims to scribble on the walls of her private residence. For the love of God, catch me, if you please. Ahead of me, killing more. I am unable to exercise self-control. He was referred to as the lipstick killer by the media, and the authorities made an effort to locate him before he committed another murder. His last victim was a young girl named Suzanne Daignan, who was taken from her house when she was just 6 years old. The fragments of her body were found in various locations throughout the Edgewater area. A message that was left behind demanded $20,000 and warned the recipient not to get in touch with the FBI. William Herons, who was 17 years old at the time of the murder, was finally taken into custody 6 months after the crime was committed when someone saw him breaking into an apartment. He was identified as the lipstick killer by the prosecution, who stated that they had fingerprints and handwriting analysis to establish their case. In exchange for a guilty plea, Herons was spared the death penalty. Nonetheless, the young teen claimed that he was assaulted and administered truth serum while he was in the custody of the police. The remainder of Hiron's life was spent incarcerated in prison. In 2012, he passed away. Number 5. The Happy Face Killer. In the early 1990s, Keith Hunter Jesperson was responsible for the deaths of 8 different women over the course of 5 years. It was possible for the deranged serial killer to travel across the country as a cold-blooded killer because he worked as a truck driver for an interstate trucking company. On the other hand, he became dissatisfied with the lack of attention that was being paid to the murders, and he started making fun of the police through the local news outlet. Jesperson began writing letters to the Oregonian, in which he filled in the details of his killings and signed each letter with a cheerful face and a smile. In addition, there were grinning faces that were left behind near the location of the murders, as well as graffiti on the walls of truck stops that he had visited beforehand. Despite being referred to as the Happy Face Killer, he was able to evade capture and maintain his anonymity until the year 1995. He was finally able to put an end to his reign of terror when his long-term partner was able to provide proof to the authorities. It was verified that Jesperson was responsible for the deaths of 8 women in the states of California, Florida, Nebraska, Oregon, Washington, and Wyoming at the time of his confession. Behind jail, he asserted that the actual number of victims was somewhere around 185. Number 4. The Axman of New Orleans. The Axman of New Orleans was responsible for the deaths of 6 persons and the severe injuries of 6 others between the years 1918 and 1919. An Italian grocery shop proprietor and his wife were the first victims. They were discovered in bed at home with their throats cut and skulls battered in with an axe. The corpses were found in their rooms. In addition, the victims who came after were discovered in bed, and none of their important possessions were taken. In a letter that was delivered to the Times-Picayune newspaper, the following demands were made for the following Tuesday night. As someone who has a deep appreciation for jazz music, I solemnly swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every individual whose home is occupied by a jazz band that is performing at full capacity at the time that I have just indicated will be spared. To put it simply, if everyone is putting together a jazz band, then things are going to be even better for you. There is one thing that can be said with absolute certainty, and that is the fact that some of your employees who do not put on a show on that particular Tuesday night, assuming there are any, will be terminated. That particular Tuesday evening, the streets of New Orleans were filled with music, and nobody was hurt in the process. Next, in October of 1919, the murders came to an end in the same short amount of time that they had began. There was no search for the murderer. Number 3. Ted Bundy. Within the annals of history, Ted Bundy stands out as one of the most notorious and depraved serial killers. From 1974 to 1978, he was responsible for the deaths of at least 30 female victims across 7 states. The fact that Bundy was able to continue his vicious killing spree for such a long period of time while evading police officers is one of the most unsettling aspects of the case. After discovering a hatchet hidden beneath the front seat of Bundy's Volkswagen Beetle, Bundy's longtime girlfriend Elizabeth Kleipfer reported her suspicions to the authorities. The author of The Stranger Beside Me, Anne Rule, who had worked with Bundy at a suicide hotline, identified him from a wanted poster and also provided a tip to the police. But this, once again, was never followed up on. From the beginning of his trials to the end, the cold killer continued to play games. When Bundy was allowed to act as his own attorney, he was given the opportunity to cross-examine the cops who had arrested him and to punch holes in their investigations. His cruel actions eventually caught up with him, and in 1989 he was put to death with a lethal injection at the Florida State Prison. Number 2. Todd Kap. Between the years 2003 and 2016, serial killer Todd Kap was responsible for the deaths of 7 people in South Carolina. After a lady named Kayla Brown, who had been missing for some time, was ultimately found and rescued from a storage container where she had been held in chains and had watched the murder of her own boyfriend. He was finally taken into custody. Kap asserted that there are some further victims. A letter that he addressed to the Spartanburg Herald-Journal was 8 pages long and contained the following statement: "Yes, there is more than 7. I attempted to inform the investigators, and I did inform the FBI, but it was taken off the radar." An additional statement that he made was, "At this point, I really don't see any reason to give numbers or locations." John Douglas, a former special agent for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, stated in a documentary titled Serial Killer, Devil Unchained, that he believes the criminal. He is quite particular and has a lot of detail. Additionally, he enjoys bragging about his abilities and his violent behavior. Since that time, Kap has asserted that there were at least 2 further murders, although he has not yet provided the authorities with the specifics. Number 1. Golden State Killer. The crimes committed by Joseph D'Angelo were referred to by a variety of aliases, including Golden State Killer, East Area Rapist, Original Night Stalker,